Hello everyone, you are all welcome to Alveoly E-learning. My name is MK Obin. I'm one of the instructors at Alveoly E-learning. At Alveoly E-learning, we exchange your learning problems with our simple learning solutions like the alveoli of the lungs. All you have to do is to get a phone or a laptop or a computer with an internet. Then with your pen and paper or with a notepad and a pen, you just go online, you sign up to www.alveoli.com and you are good to go, and voila, you are enjoying your lessons at Alveoly E-learning. So what usually happens in DK is that we have a condition known as diabetes mellitus. And in diabetes mellitus, the basic thing to understand in diabetes mellitus or DM is that there is an organ in our body known as what? Pancreas. And the pancreas has a portion known as the islet of Langerhans. And this islet of Langerhans, there is a portion, or it contains some parts. We call them alpha cells, beta cells, and delta. And the function of the beta cells is that it releases what? Insulin. And the function of this insulin is that the insulin picks up what? Glucose and fixes them in the cell. Then within the cell, there is burning of the glucose with oxygen to generate energy. But in the case of diabetes mellitus, usually it's either the pancreas is not producing insulin very well, or the cells are not responding to the presence of the insulin. We have two types of diabetes mellitus. Okay, we have type 1 and type 2. With the type 1, what usually happens is that these beta cells have been damaged, or there is a major problem with the pancreas to an extent that these beta cells cannot produce insulin at all. So because they cannot produce insulin, our body has to use a different mechanism to metabolize other substances to release energy. The normal process in our body is that glucose has to be used to generate energy. But how will glucose be used to generate energy? You see, this is a cell. Then this is, let's say, the glucose. Okay, so this glucose, insulin has to pick this glucose and fix it into the cell so that this glucose will be burnt in oxygen to release energy. That is the normal physiology in our body. But this is a situation where there is a problem with the pancreas or the beta cells to an extent that there is no insulin production. So if there is no insulin production, then it means that there will be no insulin to pick up this glucose and fix them into the cell. So at the end of the day, the metabolism of glucose have been affected to an extent that energy cannot be produced with the use of glucose. So our body has to fall on other sources to generate energy, and the sources that they fall on is on protein. It's on protein and fats. Okay, so with type 1 diabetes, there is no insulin production at all. So that person is supposed to depend on insulin for the rest of his life. So if he's dependent on that insulin, then it means that our body has to use other mechanisms to generate energy. Example, the use of proteins and fats to convert it to generate energy. Okay, then in the course of converting this protein and fat to generate energy, they end up releasing a substance known as ketones. Then these ketones are in the form of an acid. Then when these ketones accumulate in the body, then it leads to DKA, or diabetic ketone acidosis. So basically, this is what happens in DKA. I'm saying that DKA mostly occurs in type 1. Okay. Then the reason why is that in type 1, there is a problem with this pancreas to an extent that there is no insulin production, or the insulin production is so small or so minute that we have to give the person a replacement of an insulin subcut or an insulin injection. Okay, then because the insulin production is so less or there's none at all, then our body has to fall on what? Protein and fat to generate energy. In the course of falling on protein and fat to generate energy, they release a byproduct known as what? Ketones. These ketones accumulate in our blood, then it leads to diabetic what? Ketoacidosis. Okay, so mostly they can ask a question that which of the following is a complication of type 1 diabetes mellitus. So a complication of type 1 diabetes mellitus is mostly what? DKA. So kindly put it in mind. However, in type 2, what usually happens is that the pancreas is functioning and is producing insulin, but that insulin is not enough or the cells are not responding well. And with the type 2, you might not need to have an insulin injection. They can usually put you on oral hypoglycemic drugs. Then in the course of doing that, then some lifestyle changes, then it will help in modification. Then your glucose level can become stabilized. Are you getting it? So because of that, in type 2, they don't usually develop what? DKA. Why? Because there is insulin production, just that it might not be very enough or the cells might not be responding to it. However, in type 1, there is no what? Insulin production, or the insulin production is so small because there have been a disease or something that has affected the pancreas. For instance, when a child develops an infection at a young age, maybe a viral infection or a bacterial infection, this infection can go and affect the pancreas. Then in the course of doing that, damage the cells of the pancreas, so the pancreas is not able to produce what? Insulin. Okay, then it leads to type 1. That is why type 1 is also known as what? Juvenile diabetes or diabetes that usually occurs when the person is a child, whilst type 2 can be described as what? An adult one. Okay, or it occurs when the person is an adult. Why? Because it's usually as a result of lifestyle changes like eating very late in the night, the sedentary lifestyle, you don't do exercise, then it leads to the type 2. Okay, but the type 1, it occurs when there is usually a viral infection or an infection that has affected the pancreas, okay, at a younger stage. So that's why we call it what? Juvenile what? Diabetes or insulin dependent diabetes, because with the type 1, the person has to depend on insulin the rest of his or her life. So because of that, our body one way or the other has to find a way, you see, to generate energy without the use of what? Glucose. So it uses what? Proteins and fat to generate energy. Then in the course of doing that, there are some byproducts which are produced, which are known as what? Ketones. These ketones accumulate in the blood, then it leads to what? The occurrence of DKA. So DKA is mostly a complication of what? Type 1 diabetes what? Mellitus. And it is a form of what? Metabolic what? Acidosis. Because the metabolism of glucose have been affected to the extent that it is the breaking down of this one that can generate energy, but because it can't break completely, it releases ketones, then it leads to what? DKA. So 1, DKA is a form of what? Metabolic acidosis. 2, it occurs mostly in type 1 diabetes mellitus, and the problem with DKA is mostly what? Dehydration. So when they can usually have to what? Hydrate them with normal saline. And the more you give the fluids, the more it helps to reduce their glucose level. Later on, when we are doing diabetes mellitus as a topic on its own, we'll look more into that. So we've talked about DKA as a form of metabolic acidosis. So now let's look at the second one. So the second one, we have hyperchloremic. So the second one is So with hyperchloremic acidosis, what usually occurs is that there's a chemical known as bicarbonate. And this bicarbonate helps when you are having too much acid in the body. When we are having too much acid in the body, what happens is that our body has to produce more of this bicarbonate to come and balance the acid level, but this one is more of an alkaline, so that if you have an acid being formed, bicarbonate will come and balance it up, because it's an alkaline, to reduce this acidic level. So this implies that under any condition or under any metabolic activity where there is excessive excretion of this bicarbonate, then it means that your blood will become more acidic as compared to an alkaline. So let me explain it this way. So if your blood is becoming more acidic, then it means that you need more bicarbonate, which is an alkaline, to be balancing the situation. However, if something happens in the body or metabolic activities happen in the body which led to excessive excretion of the bicarbonate, then it means that your bicarbonate level is going to be low, whilst your acid is high. Then you develop acidosis. Okay, example is diarrhea. You see, these bicarbonates, there's a lot of it in the large intestines. However, if you develop diarrhea, you are going to pass a lot of watery stew, and as you pass a lot of watery stew, you tend to lose more of these bicarbonates, and as you lose more of these bicarbonates, it reduces the alkaline level in the blood, and it makes your blood more acidic, and as your blood becomes more acidic, then it leads to acidosis. So because this is not as a result of a respiratory problem, but a metabolic activity that has led to loss of bicarbonate and high level of an acid, then we term it under metabolic acidosis, and this is under hyperchloremic acidosis. So basically, that is all that you need to understand about hyperchloremic acidosis. Now let's look at the third one. So with the third one, we have lactic acidosis. So with lactic acidosis, what usually happens is that when you are doing exercise, what usually happens is that you need a lot of glucose to generate energy for the exercise that you are doing. However, you have only 2 nostrils, and that 2 nostrils cannot accommodate in a lot of oxygen, you see, to burn the glucose to release energy. So your body has to find a way out to burn the glucose or break the glucose down to release energy. So because the oxygen is not enough, okay, because there is a lot of demand on the body, then what happens is that your body has to break down the glucose without the use of oxygen, and in the course of doing that, they produce a substance known as lactic acid. Okay, and it is this lactic acid deposition that is what usually results in muscle ache, especially after a strenuous or a severe exercise or aerobics, when you do an aerobics. Okay, so when this lactic acid deposits in the body and it becomes more, then we term it as lactic acidosis. So basically that is that. So because it's as a result of inability of the glucose to break down completely to release energy with the use of oxygen, then we term it as lactic acidosis. This can also occur in patients with heart failure or patients with cancer as well, and liver conditions, okay, where glucose metabolism is being affected. Okay. Then the last one that we are going to talk about in metabolic acidosis is known as renal tubular acidosis. Renal tubular. So under renal tubular acidosis, we initially said that the function of our kidneys is that it helps in to maintain our acid-base balance by excreting a lot of hydrogen ions if our body is becoming too much acidic. Now, if a patient has a renal tubular condition or a kidney problem or a renal problem, then it means that the kidneys or the renal system cannot excrete the hydrogen ions through our urine, leading to excessive accumulation of what? Hydrogen ions. And you know that when hydrogen ions accumulate, from our previous lesson, it leads to what? Acidosis. So because it's inability of the kidney to excrete it, then we call it what? Metabolic what? Acidosis. So basically, these are the most important points that you have to understand under metabolic acidosis. So we are saying that metabolic acidosis occurs when the cause of acidosis is as a result of what? A metabolic condition. And to be specific, we made mention of DKA, and we are saying that DKA mostly occurs in what? Type 1 diabetes what? Mellitus. Okay. Type 1 is also known as what? Juvenile diabetes or insulin-dependent diabetes mellitus. So sometimes, instead of saying DKA occurs in type 1, they will not mention that they mention DKA occurs in which of the following, then they will bring juvenile diabetes what? Mellitus or insulin-dependent diabetes mellitus. It's the same. Then we also talked about hypochloremic acidosis, where there is what? Excessive excretion or removal of what? Bicarbonate. That leads to excessive accumulation of what? Hydrogen ions, making the blood more acidic. Then we also talk about lactic acidosis, which is as a result of lactic acid what? Deposition in the body. Then renal tubular acidosis, which is as a result of what? The problem with the kidneys that has led to inability of the kidneys to excrete what? Hydrogen ions. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, kindly forward them below in the question section and we will answer them what? Appropriately. More videos are going to come in Alveoly E-learning. Thank you very much.